Emma Callahan was 32 years old, recently divorced, and clearing out her late grandmother's attic in Portland, Maine when she found the box that would change everything. It was October 2023, 3 months after her grandmother Catherine Morrison had died at 91. The house, a beautiful old Victorian in Portland's West End, was being sold, and Emma had volunteered to sort through 67 years of accumulated possessions because nobody else in the family wanted to do it. Also because she needed the distraction. Her divorce had been finalized 6 weeks ago, ending a 10-year marriage, and she'd moved back to Portland with no job, no plan, and a life that felt like it was packed in boxes waiting to be sorted. The attic was hot and dusty, filled with Christmas decorations, old clothes, photographs, and furniture that had been retired but not discarded. Emma had been working for 3 days, creating piles, keep, donate, trash. She was about to call it quits for the day when she noticed something odd. There was a loose floorboard beneath an old dresser. When she moved the dresser, she saw that the board could be lifted. Underneath was a metal box, old and rusted, about the size of a showbox. Emma's heart beat faster as she lifted it out. The box was locked, but the lock was old and broke easily when she applied pressure. Inside were letters. Maybe 50 of them, all in envelopes that had yellowed with age. All addressed to Catherine Morrison at a different address. All postmarked from 1955 to 1956. All from someone named James Hartley. Emma opened the first letter carefully, the paper brittle in her hands. "My dearest Catherine," it began. "I received your letter today, and my heart breaks knowing you're suffering. Your mother had no right to say those things to you. You are not shameful. What we have is not shameful. It is the most beautiful, pure love I have ever known." Emma's hands trembled as she read. These were love letters. Passionate, desperate love letters from a man to a woman who was being kept from him. And as she looked closer at the envelopes, she realized something that made her blood run cold. None of them had been opened. Not one. Her grandmother had never read these letters. Had never known what was in them. Someone had hidden them away, and a love story had been lost for 67 years. Emma Callahan was 32 years old, recently divorced, and clearing out her grandmother's house because nobody else in the family wanted to do it. Her grandmother, Catherine Morrison, had died 3 months ago at 91. She'd lived in the same house in Portland's West End for 67 years, ever since marrying Emma's grandfather in 1956. The house was a beautiful old Victorian, but it was also full of 67 years of accumulated possessions, and the family had decided to sell it rather than fight over who got what. Emma had volunteered to sort through everything because she needed the distraction. Her divorce had been finalized 6 weeks ago, ending a 10-year marriage that had slowly suffocated her. She'd moved back to Portland from Boston, back to her childhood home, back to square one at 32. Clearing out her grandmother's attic seemed like appropriate work for someone whose own life felt like it was in boxes, waiting to be sorted. The attic was hot and dusty, filled with the detritus of a long life. Christmas decorations. Old clothes. Boxes of photographs. Furniture that had been retired but not discarded. Emma had been working for 3 days, sorting things into piles, keep, donate, trash. She was about to call it quits for the day when she noticed something odd. There was a loose board in the floor beneath an old dresser. When she moved the dresser, she saw that the board could be lifted. Underneath was a metal box, old and rusted, about the size of a showbox. Emma's heart beat faster as she lifted it out. The box was locked, but the lock was old and broke easily when she applied pressure. Inside were letters. Maybe 50 of them, all in envelopes that had yellowed with age. All addressed to Catherine Morrison at a different address, not this house. All postmarked from 1955 to 1956. All from someone named James Hartley. Emma opened the first letter carefully, the paper brittle in her hands. "My dearest Catherine," it began. "I received your letter today, and my heart breaks knowing you're suffering. Your mother had no right to say those things to you. You are not shameful. What we have is not shameful. It is the most beautiful, pure love I have ever known." Emma's hands trembled as she kept reading. The letter was a love letter, passionate and desperate, from a man to a woman who was being kept from him. As Emma read through more letters, a story emerged. James Hartley had been in love with Catherine. They'd met in 1954, when Catherine was 22 and James was 24. They'd planned to marry. But Catherine's mother, Emma's great-grandmother, had objected violently. James came from a poor family. His father had been in prison. He had no prospects, no education, no future that Catherine's mother deemed acceptable. Catherine's mother had forbidden the relationship. She'd sent Catherine to live with relatives in New York for a year to get over this foolishness. James had written letters, pouring out his heart, begging Catherine to wait for him, promising he'd make something of himself, promising he'd be worthy of her. The letters were beautiful and heartbreaking. James wrote about working 2 jobs to save money, about taking night classes to get his high school equivalency, about his dreams of building a life with Catherine, about how much he loved her and missed her. The last letter was dated March 1956. "My dearest Catherine," James wrote, "I haven't heard from you in 3 months. Your mother returned my last 5 letters unopened. I don't know if you're receiving these. I don't know if you still love me. But I want you to know that I will wait for you forever if I have to. You are my whole heart. If you've moved on, if you've found someone else your mother approves of, I'll understand. But please, just send me 1 letter. Tell me if there's still hope. Tell me if I should keep waiting. I love you with everything I am. Always, James." Emma sat in the dusty attic, tears streaming down her face, holding these 67-year-old letters from a man her grandmother had apparently loved and lost. But her grandmother had married Emma's grandfather, Robert Morrison, in June of 1956. Just 3 months after James's last letter. Had Catherine ever received these letters? Had she chosen to move on? Or had her mother hidden them? Emma looked at the envelopes more carefully. None of them had been opened. Not one. Catherine had never read these letters. She'd never known that James was waiting for her, working to make himself worthy, loving her desperately across the distance. Emma's great-grandmother had intercepted them all, hidden them, and let Catherine believe that James had abandoned her. "Oh, Grandma," Emma whispered. "What did she do to you?" Emma couldn't stop thinking about the letters. She took them home and read them over and over, learning about this James Hartley who had loved her grandmother so completely. She learned that he loved to read, that he wanted to be a teacher, that he believed education could change lives. She learned that he was kind to his younger siblings, that he volunteered at a soup kitchen, that he dreamed of traveling to see the ocean. She learned that he had been a good man who loved Catherine with a devotion that was almost painful to read about. And she couldn't help but think about her grandmother's marriage to her grandfather Robert. It had been fine, cordial, respectful. But Emma had never seen passion between them. Never seen the kind of desperate love that James wrote about in his letters. Had her grandmother spent 67 years married to the wrong man? Had she spent a lifetime wondering what happened to James, believing he'd abandoned her? Emma needed to know what happened to James Hartley. She started researching. In 2023, it was easier than it would have been even 10 years ago. She searched census records, public databases, social media. She called information services. She became obsessed. 3 days later, she found him. James Robert Hartley, now 91 years old, living in a senior community in Brunswick, Maine. Just 30 miles from Portland. He'd been here all along. Close enough to visit. Close enough to have found Catherine if he'd known she was there. Emma's hands shook as she wrote down the address. What should she do? Call him. Write to him. Show up at his door with 67-year-old love letters. She decided to start with a phone call. The number was listed. Emma dialed it 3 times before she let it ring through. "Hello." An old man's voice, still strong despite his age. "Mr. Hartley. James Hartley." "Yes, this is James. Who's calling?" Emma took a deep breath. "My name is Emma Callahan. You don't know me, but I think you knew my grandmother. Catherine Morrison. She passed away 3 months ago." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Emma could hear James breathing, could almost feel the emotions rolling through him across the phone line. "Catherine," he finally said, his voice breaking. "Is she really gone?" "Yes, sir. I'm so sorry. Another long silence. How did you find me? James asked. I found letters, Emma said. In my grandmother's attic. Letters you wrote to her in 1955 and 1956. Mr. Hartley, I don't think she ever received them. I don't think she ever read them. Her mother hid them. Emma heard a sound that might have been a sob. She never got them. James said. All that time, I thought she'd read them and decided I wasn't worth waiting for. I thought she'd chosen someone better. She married my grandfather in 1956, Emma admitted. But Mr. Hartley, these letters, they're beautiful. And I think she deserved to know what was in them. I think you both deserved better than what happened. Can I? James's voice was tentative. Can I see them? The letters? Yes, Emma said. Absolutely. Would you like me to bring them to you? Please, James said. God, yes, please. 2 days later, Emma drove to Brunswick with the box of letters carefully wrapped in tissue paper on the passenger seat beside her. The senior community where James lived was nice, one of those places with independent apartments and communal dining rooms and activities for active seniors. Emma gave her name at the front desk, and they directed her to apartment 3B. James opened the door before she could knock. He was tall, even stooped with age. He had white hair and kind blue eyes behind glasses. He was wearing slacks and a cardigan, and Emma could see him trembling as he looked at her. You look like her, James said softly. You have her eyes. Emma felt tears spring to her own eyes. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hartley. Call me James, please. Come in. His apartment was small but comfortable. Filled with books, Emma noticed. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with volumes. On the wall were framed degrees. Bachelor's in education, master's in education, doctorate in education. He'd done it. He'd become the teacher he'd dreamed of being. They sat in his small living room, and Emma handed him the box. James held it like it was made of glass. I can't believe these still exist, he said. I wrote them so long ago. I was a different person then. I don't think you were that different, Emma said gently. You became exactly who you said you'd become. You educated yourself. You made something of your life. You did everything you promised her you'd do. James opened the box and pulled out the first letter. His hands shook as he unfolded it. I remember writing this, he said. I was working at the cannery during the day and the docks at night. I was so tired I could barely hold the pen. But I had to write to her. Had to let her know I was still waiting. He read through several letters, tears running down his weathered cheeks. Emma sat quietly, giving him space to process. Her mother hated me, James said finally. Mrs. Parker. She looked at me and saw trash. Saw my father's prison record. Saw poverty and no future. She wouldn't even let me speak to Catherine at the end. Just told me to leave her daughter alone and make something of myself if I wanted to be worthy of anyone. So you did, Emma said. So I did, James confirmed. Got my GED. Worked my way through community college, then university, then graduate school. Became a professor. Taught education theory for 40 years at the University of Maine. Published 6 books. Mentored hundreds of teachers. Built a whole career on the belief that education could change lives. Because it changed yours, Emma said. Because it changed mine, James agreed. Mrs. Parker told me I wasn't good enough for Catherine. So I spent my whole life proving I was good enough for someone. Did you ever marry? Emma asked gently. James shook his head. Almost. Once. Sweet woman named Patricia. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't stand at the altar and promise her my whole heart when part of it still belonged to Catherine. I broke it off 3 weeks before the wedding. Patricia deserved better than second place. He looked at Emma with those kind blue eyes. What was her life like? Catherine's. Was she happy? Emma thought about her grandparents' marriage. About the separate bedrooms they'd had for as long as she could remember. About the polite distance between them. About how her grandmother had always seemed wistful, looking out windows like she was waiting for something that never came. I think she loved my grandfather in her way, Emma said carefully. But I don't think she was the kind of happy that you wrote about in these letters. I think she settled. And I think she probably spent her whole life wondering what happened to you. James covered his face with his hands. God, what a waste. What a terrible waste. We could have had 60 years together. We could have built a life. Had children. Had grandchildren. You still could have found each other, Emma said. After her mother died. After my grandfather died. You were both still alive. You were close by. I tried, James admitted. In 1990, after I read in the paper that Mrs. Parker had died, I looked for Catherine. But I couldn't find her. She'd changed her name to Morrison when she married. I looked for Catherine Parker and found nothing. I assumed she'd moved away from Maine. I never thought to look for Catherine Morrison. They sat in silence for a moment, mourning the decades of lost time, the life that could have been. Mr. Hartley, Emma said finally. James. My grandmother kept a journal. I found it when I was cleaning out the house. Would you like to see it? Emma returned the next day with her grandmother's journal. It was a leather-bound book, filled with Catherine's neat handwriting, spanning decades. James held it reverently. Are you sure I should read this? She would have wanted you to, Emma said. I'm certain of that. James opened to the first entry, dated 1957. I married Robert yesterday. Mother is pleased. He is a good man, stable and reliable. He will provide a good life for me. But as I stood at the altar, I couldn't stop thinking about James. Wondering where he is. Wondering why he stopped writing. Wondering if I meant anything to him at all. Mother says I'm being foolish, that James was just a phase, that I'll forget him in time. But I don't think I will. I think I'll carry him with me forever, like a ghost. Like a song I can't quite remember but can't quite forget. James read entry after entry. Catherine wrote about her marriage, about having children, about the life she built. But threaded through everything was James. She wrote about him on anniversaries. On birthdays. On random Tuesday afternoons when something reminded her of him. In 1970, she wrote, I saw a man at the grocery store today who looked like James. Same height. Same way of standing. My heart stopped. I followed him for 3 aisles before I realized it wasn't him. I'm 40 years old, married for 14 years, with 2 children, and I'm still looking for a man I knew for less than a year. Robert would be devastated if he knew. Maybe he does know. Maybe that's why there's always been this distance between us. You can't love someone completely when part of your heart belongs to someone else. In 1985, she wrote, Mother died today. I should feel sad, but mostly I feel angry. She controlled so much of my life. She made so many decisions for me. I wonder sometimes what my life would have been if I'd stood up to her. If I'd fought for James. If I'd waited for him. But it's too late now. James has probably been married for 30 years. Has children and grandchildren. Has forgotten all about the foolish girl who loved him once. In 2003, after Robert died, she wrote, I'm a widow now. Robert was a good man. He deserved better than a wife who was always looking over her shoulder at the past. I hope he knew I cared for him, even if I couldn't love him the way he deserved. I'm 69 years old, and I'm alone, and all I can think about is how I've wasted my life. How I let my mother make my choices. How I never fought for what I wanted. How I let James go without even knowing what happened to him. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before Catherine died. I'm dying. The doctors say it's a matter of weeks now. My daughters are here, fussing over me, making sure I'm comfortable. My granddaughter Emma visits every day. She reminds me of myself at that age. Full of hope and dreams. I want to tell her not to let anyone steal her dreams. Not to let fear keep her from the life she wants. Not to end up like me, an old woman full of regrets. But I don't know how to say it without explaining about James, and I can't bear to tell anyone about him. He's my secret. My private heartbreak. The what if that haunted my whole life. James closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. She never stopped thinking about me. No, Emma said gently. She never did. And I never stopped thinking about her, James said. 67 years, and I never stopped loving her. He looked at Emma. Thank you for bringing me these. For letting me know that I mattered to her. That I wasn't just some foolish boy she forgot about. That means more to me than you can possibly understand. There's more, Emma said. She pulled out a photograph. It was Catherine at 22, beautiful and young, smiling at the camera with hope in her eyes. This was taken in 1954, Emma said. Right around when you two met. I thought you might like to have it. James took the photograph with shaking hands. She was so beautiful, he whispered. So full of life. She kept this in her nightstand, Emma said. Right where she could see it. There's writing on the back. James turned it over. In Catherine's handwriting, the girl I was before my heart broke. The girl who knew how to love. Before I learned to settle. James held the photograph to his chest and wept. Over the following weeks, Emma visited James regularly. They became friends, connected by their shared love for Catherine and by their own parallel experiences of lost love and wasted years. James told Emma about his life. About the career he'd built, the students he'd mentored, the books he'd written. About the good he'd done, even if his personal life had been lonely. Emma told James about her divorce, about the marriage she'd stayed in too long because she was afraid of disappointing people, afraid of admitting failure. You're young, James told her one afternoon as they sat in his apartment drinking tea. You have time to find your way. Don't waste it like Catherine and I did. Don't let fear keep you from the life you want. Is that what happened? Emma asked. Fear kept you apart. Not fear exactly, James said thoughtfully. Circumstance. Her mother's prejudice. Bad timing. The fact that we both spent decades looking for each other but never finding each other. But yes, also fear. Fear that we weren't good enough. Fear that love wasn't enough. Fear that we couldn't overcome the obstacles. He paused. But you know what I've learned. Love is enough. If you find it, real love, the kind that Catherine and I had, you fight for it. You don't let anything stand in your way. Not class differences, not family objections, not fear, not pride. You fight for it. Emma thought about that. About her own marriage that she'd stayed in because leaving felt like failure. About how she'd settled for comfort instead of fighting for joy. I don't want to live with regrets, Emma said quietly. I don't want to end up like Grandma, always looking over my shoulder at what could have been. Then don't, James said firmly. You have your whole life ahead of you. Choose it. Fight for it. Don't let anyone tell you who you should be or what you should want. Catherine didn't fight, and she regretted it for 67 years. Don't make the same mistake. One December afternoon, Emma arrived at James's apartment for their usual visit and found him packing a bag. What's happening? She asked, worried. I'm going to see her, James said. See who? Catherine, James said. I know she's gone. But I'm going to visit her grave. I'm going to read her these letters. I'm going to tell her everything I should have told her 67 years ago. Will you take me? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Of course. Of course I will. They drove to Evergreen Cemetery on a cold December morning. Snow was falling lightly, covering the ground in white. Emma led James to her grandmother's grave, a simple headstone. Catherine Morrison, 1932 to 2023, beloved mother and grandmother. James stood before the grave, the box of letters in his hands, tears running down his weathered face. Hello, Catherine, he said softly. It's me, James. I know it's been 67 years. I know I should have found you sooner. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He knelt down, his old bones protesting, and placed the box of letters on the ground before the headstone. I never stopped loving you, he said. Not for one day. Not for one moment. You were the only woman I ever loved. The only one I ever wanted. And I know now that you felt the same way. That your mother kept us apart. That we were both looking for each other all these years. He pulled out a single letter from the box. The last one he'd written, the one asking Catherine if there was still hope. I'm going to read this to you now, James said. The letter you never got. The letter that might have changed everything if you'd received it. He read it aloud, his voice shaking but strong. When he finished, he folded it carefully and placed it back in the box. "I forgive your mother," James said. "I know that's what you'd want. She was protecting you, in her way. She was wrong, but she thought she was doing the right thing. So I forgive her." He paused. "And I forgive us. For not fighting harder. For giving up too easily. For letting fear and pride and circumstance keep us apart. We should have done better. But we were young and scared and we didn't know how." James pulled something from his pocket. A small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple ring, old and tarnished. "I bought this in 1956, he said. "The day before I wrote my last letter to you. I was going to propose. I was going to ask you to marry me, to run away with me, to build a life together even if your mother disowned you. But I never got the chance." He placed the ring on the grave. "So I'm asking now," James said. "Catherine Parker, will you marry me? Will you be mine, the way you were always supposed to be? I know it's 67 years too late. I know we can't have the life we should have had. But maybe in whatever comes next, maybe we'll find each other again. Maybe we'll get the life we were meant to have." He stood up slowly, Emma helping him. "Goodbye, my love," James said. "I'll see you soon. Wait for me." Emma was crying openly. James was crying too. "Thank you," he said to Emma. "Thank you for letting me say goodbye. For giving me this closure. You're a remarkable young woman. Your grandmother would be so proud of you." As they walked back to the car, James stopped and looked at Emma. "You know what I want you to do," he said. "What?" "I want you to live," James said. "Really live. Fight for what you want. Love without fear. Don't settle. Don't let anyone tell you who you should be. Promise me." "I promise," Emma said. James Hartley died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks after visiting Catherine's grave. He was 91 years old. The nurses at his senior community found him in bed, a slight smile on his face, Emma's photograph of Catherine clutched in his hand. Emma was listed as his only heir. He left her his books, his writings, his small savings account, and a letter. The letter thanked her for the gift she'd given him, not just the letters, but the knowledge that he'd been loved. That his life had mattered to Catherine. That their love story, although tragic, had been real and deep and true. "Don't waste time," James wrote. "Don't settle. Don't let fear keep you from joy. Fight for what you want. Love without reservation. Live fully. Don't end up like Catherine and me, full of regrets and what ifs. You have time. Use it wisely." Emma framed that letter. It hangs in her office now, in the business she started 6 months after James died, a consulting firm that helps women transition out of careers that don't fit them into work that does. She calls it Second Chances Consulting. The tagline is, "It's never too late." She took James's advice. Moved back to Boston but on her own terms this time. Started the business. Started dating again, but differently, looking for the kind of love James and Catherine had, the kind worth fighting for. She hasn't found it yet, but she's not settling for less. Last month, she met a man at a coffee shop. They talked for 3 hours. He's divorced too, starting over at 40. They're taking it slow, but there's something there. Something that makes Emma think of those letters, of the way James wrote about Catherine with such devotion. She told him about the letters on their 3rd date. About Catherine and James, about the 67 years they lost, about the reunion that came too late. "That's heartbreaking," he said. "It is," Emma agreed. "But it also taught me something. It taught me not to wait. Not to let fear or other people's opinions or anything else keep me from what I want. James spent his whole life alone because he lost Catherine. I'm not going to make that mistake." The man, his name is David, smiled at her. "Neither am I." Emma had James and Catherine buried side by side in Evergreen Cemetery, just like she'd promised. The headstone reads, James Hartley, 1932 to 2023, and Catherine Morrison, 1932 to 2023. Finally together. Finally home. She visits them sometimes, brings flowers, tells them about her life. She likes to think they can hear her. That wherever they are, they're finally together, finally having the life they should have had. Catherine's daughters, Emma's mother and aunt, came to the burial. Emma's mother, Patricia, stood at the grave and cried. "I didn't know," Patricia said. "All those years, I thought Mom was happy with Dad. I didn't know she'd loved someone else first. That she'd spent her whole life mourning him." "Gran Catherine loved Grandpa Robert," Emma said. "But she loved James first. And she never got over losing him." Patricia looked at the grave, at the ring James had placed there, now sealed under glass to preserve it, at the letters Emma had left in a waterproof box beneath the marker. "I've been thinking," Patricia said, "about my own life. About the choices I made. I chased success and status and money, and you know what I got? 3 failed marriages and a heart so lonely I can't stand my own company." She turned to Emma. "Your grandmother lived with regret for 67 years. I've been living with it for 40. But you're choosing differently. You're fighting for what you want. You're not settling." "I learned from her mistakes," Emma said. "And from James's. And from yours, Mom. No offense." Patricia smiled through her tears. "No offense taken. I'm glad you learned. I'm glad my mistakes taught you something." Emma's mother moved to Portland 6 months ago. She sold her Manhattan apartment, took early retirement from her consulting job, and rented a small house near Emma. They have dinner together twice a week now. They're learning to be friends, not just mother and daughter. Patricia started therapy. Started facing the loneliness she'd been running from her whole life. Started, slowly, to figure out who she was beyond her career and her failed relationships. "I think I'm having a midlife crisis at 63, Patricia told Emma over dinner last week. "Better late than never," Emma said. "James taught me that. He became a teacher at 40. Built a whole career after everyone said it was too late. You can still figure out who you are, Mom. It's not too late." Patricia reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "When did you get so wise?" "When I found 67-year-old love letters in Gran Catherine's attic and realized that the choices we make ripple through generations." Gran Catherine settled. "You ran. I'm choosing neither. I'm fighting for what I want while being okay with being alone until I find it." The letters, the originals, are in a climate-controlled storage unit. Emma had them professionally preserved. Someday, she might donate them to a museum or archive. For now, they're private, a family treasure that tells a story of love and loss and the damage done by interference and fear. But Emma made copies. High-quality scans of every letter, every envelope, every margin note. She's thinking about publishing them, with James's memoir alongside them. The story from both sides, the love that almost was. She's been reaching out to publishers. Several are interested. They say it's a powerful story, timeless, relevant. A cautionary tale about not waiting, about not letting others make your choices, about fighting for love even when it's hard. Emma hopes James and Catherine would approve. She thinks they would. They'd want their story to mean something, to teach people not to make their mistakes. Last week, Emma went through her own belongings, the boxes she'd packed when she left Boston, the remnants of her old life that she'd been dragging around for 2 years. She found letters from her ex-husband, from when they were dating. She read through them, looking for the kind of passion James had written with, the kind of devotion that lasted 67 years. She didn't find it. The letters were nice, affectionate even, but safe. Comfortable. They were the letters of 2 people who liked each other and thought that was enough. Emma threw them away. All of them. She's not settling for nice or comfortable anymore. She wants the kind of love that survives decades of separation. The kind that makes 91-year-old men cry. The kind worth fighting for, even when everyone says it's impossible. David, the man from the coffee shop, wrote her a letter last week. An actual handwritten letter, delivered by mail. It wasn't long, maybe 2 pages, but it was thoughtful and funny and real. At the end, he wrote, "I don't know if this is going anywhere. But I know I want to find out. You're worth the risk of getting hurt again. You're worth fighting for." Emma read that letter 5 times. Then she wrote back, by hand, on good stationery. She told him about James and Catherine. About the letters that were never opened. About the 67 years lost to fear and interference. I don't want to waste time, she wrote. I don't want to play it safe. I don't know if we're right for each other. But I want to find out. And I want to do it honestly, openly, without fear. Because I've seen what fear costs, and the price is too high. She mailed it yesterday. She doesn't know what he'll say. Maybe he'll run. Maybe he'll think she's too intense, too forward, too much. But maybe he'll understand. Maybe he'll rise to meet her. Maybe they'll build something real. And if they don't, Emma will be okay. She's learned that being alone is better than settling. That you can survive heartbreak. That it's never too late to start over and fight for what you want. She stands at Catherine and James's grave one more time, looking at the headstone, at the ring under glass, at the love that waited 67 years to be reunited. I'm not making your mistake, Emma tells them. I'm fighting for what I want. I'm living without regret. I'm choosing love over fear, honesty over safety, passion over comfort. The wind rustles through the trees. A bird sings nearby. The October sun slants through the leaves. Emma takes out the penny she's been carrying, the one from James's pocket when he died, given to her by the hospice nurse. She places it on the grave, heads up for good luck. Thank you, she whispers. For teaching me. For showing me what matters. For giving me permission to fight for my life instead of settling for someone else's version of it. She walks back to her car, back to her business, back to her life that she's building from scratch at 32. Back to David and the possibility he represents. Back to the future she's creating, informed by the past but not imprisoned by it. The letters found in an attic changed everything. Not just for Emma, but for Patricia, for David, for everyone who will eventually read James and Catherine's story and learn from their mistakes. Sometimes the things we lose find their way back to us in unexpected ways. Sometimes the past teaches us exactly what we need to know about the present. Sometimes 67-year-old letters save lives by showing us how not to waste the time we have. James and Catherine never got their happy ending. But their story, their tragedy, became Emma's beginning. Their wasted years taught her not to waste hers. Their lost love showed her what to fight for. That's legacy. That's what it means for love to transcend death. Not in dramatic reunions or happy endings, but in lessons learned, in choices made differently, in generations breaking cycles instead of repeating them. Emma drives away from the cemetery, the autumn leaves falling around her, the future uncertain but full of possibility. She's fighting for what she wants. She's living without regret. She's honoring James and Catherine by refusing to make their mistakes. And that's enough. That's everything.